Hello, everyone. This is your host, Gemma Putty, bringing vibrant living conversations from North Idaho and across this region. I'm so excited to chat with entrepreneurs, creatives, and believers as we journey together to connect more deeply to ourselves, our earth, and our communities. Today, I am talking with Dr. Pamela Langenderfer, co-owner with her husband, Dr. Jerry Bailey, of Lakeside Holistic Health in Coeur d'Alene and Liberty Lake. Dr. Pam's philosophy is deeply rooted in naturopathic medicine, Chinese medicine, and functional medicine. Her mantra is, "Food is your foundation." She specializes in balancing hormones and integrates current research along with ancient wisdom, so the best of both Western and Eastern medicine, to bring her patients a personalized approach that identifies the core of their problem. I found Dr. Pam shortly after moving to Coeur d'Alene and after spending years flailing to get my period back after birth control. But within 6 months of seeing her, my period was back. And within a year, I was pregnant. So I love her, and I tell everyone that she's the reason I have a little boy. So Dr. Pam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
My pleasure. Yes, it's been such a roller coaster of everything since I got to know you, and you are the belief behind even this podcast, and just it's holistic, right? It's really going from your food and getting to the core of the problem. So I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, and what is your background to getting where you are now? Because I know you haven't always been in the naturopathic world.
Yeah, I actually have a bachelor's degree in exercise physiology and nutrition. And basically my undergrad was geared mainly at doing more EKG testing in the hospitals. And the nutrition training that I did, this would have been back in the early 90s. And everything back then was just so focused on calories. What I was learning, just, like you learn something and then it doesn't work and you're just kind of like, gosh, this doesn't make sense. So I actually was going to be either a physical therapist or a physician assistant, because I went to Central Michigan University, and at the time we had those programs starting, and I was volunteering with these physicians, these primary care physicians, who both had, they had been in practice for a long time, but they had very different styles, and one was a medical doctor and one was an osteopath, and I didn't really understand the difference between the two of them. Okay. And so back then, when you wanted to learn about a career, you actually had to go to career services and dig through a book about that thing, because there wasn't internet. And when I went to medical schools to try to learn about the different, what the difference between an MD and a DO was, that was when I found naturopathic medicine. And I felt like it was like, oh my gosh, everything I could ever imagine, incorporating diet and lifestyle and, just talking about nutrition and exercise and all of these things kind of encompassed into one. And that's really what sent my journey to become a naturopath, which is then where I learned about Chinese medicine. And so I did a master's degree in Chinese medicine, then did my doctorate in naturopathic medicine at the same time. And functional medicine is really deeply rooted in naturopathic medicine. So, that really didn't start until the 90s when I was in school. And functional medicine was really this way to bring evidence-based learning to the natural world, because we didn't have a lot of science behind what we did back then. And so it really was a way to kind of help to validify the natural world.
I see. That was the question I was going to ask you, because there's so many terms thrown around, right, between functional and naturopathic. And I can tell some people when I say, oh, my naturopath, they look at me like I've got 3 heads. And then I kind of backtrack and I'm like, and explain it a little bit. So then how would you explain what you learned in Chinese medicine as opposed to, I know it's completely different really, but as opposed to the functional medicine world?
So the way I describe Chinese medicine compared to either naturopathic medicine or functional medicine, naturopathic medicine and functional medicine, I always describe it as like I would go into class and you're learning like the biochemistry pathways and you're kind of going down this algorithm. And then when I go to Chinese medicine class, it's like you have this blank canvas, and you have to step back and you're randomly throwing paint up, and then at the end you see the product. And so it's very much like an art. I mean, all medicine is an art, but Chinese medicine is just much different. And one of the big driving forces as to why I learned Chinese medicine is because when I was at naturopathic medical school, back then it was garlic. Like anytime anyone got sick, you give them garlic, garlic, garlic. And I remember having this patient and they got worse. And I couldn't understand why they got worse. And then once I started to learn about Chinese medicine, everything in Chinese medicine is about balance. So when you have someone and they have a fever and their tongue is really red and they're hot and their pulse is rapid, that's a heat condition in Chinese medicine. And garlic is a hot herb. So what I did is I fueled the fire. I didn't cool it down. And so Chinese medicine is really about patterns. You could have, like 5 people come in for fertility issues or hormone issues, and they have 5 different Chinese diagnoses. And what you may give somebody for depression could be the exact same formula for PMS, for breast cancer, for even sleep issues. So you're really looking at the pattern of the person, which is why we look at the tongue, you check the pulse, and then you look at their symptoms.
I see. So Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic, like I've seen some Ayurvedic books in your office as well. And it says ancient wisdom, right? And Ayurvedic is also about balance. So are they kind of talking, are they similar in the sense that you're looking at more the holistic picture and the balance of the opposing elements like hot and cold and bitter versus?
Yeah, I'd say I would say Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine. I actually think Chinese Ayurvedic medicine is actually maybe even a little older than Chinese medicine, but they're really kind of similar in that sense where you're looking at patterns. I actually don't know Ayurvedic medicine, but there is a lot of that concept of like hot or cold or things like that. So the way to think of those ancient medicines is that 3,000-4,000 years ago, we didn't understand anatomy and physiology, but we understood the environment, we understood nature. And so what they would do was observe nature, and the body was looked at as a microcosm of nature. So if you're in this hot, dry environment and what happens, the earth is cracking, things are hot, well, then that's what you would maybe see present in somebody as their symptoms. Like they might have really dry skin and a rash, and their tongue is really red. They might have a lot of acne. They might feel super anxious, or they might have a lot of heart palpitations. All those things can be, triggered by excess heat.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, I love it all. Just it all pieces together, right? Now, the theme, you specialize in female hormone balancing, and in everything. Most of the women that I talk to over the last several years of my life, it's like we suddenly get to this mid-30s, early 30s, and we think that all of our ducks are going to align and we'll get pregnant and it'll be this easy thing and our hormones will cooperate after we've been on birth control for decades. And whatever it is for each female, it's a little different, but I keep having these conversations with friends. So I know that's what you specialize in. What do you say to someone that is there a theme of what you're seeing being out of line in hormones, and how do you kind of approach it, and what do you say to people? I'm lumping them all into one, but how do you approach hormone balance?
So the big thing is, we always talk about the person's diet, and we always look at the food part of it, because I cannot tell you how many times I have seen things improve just by dietary changes alone. And I'm a huge macro tracker, like tracking, your food and weighing and measuring it out. And I know that's such a big trigger for women because we have a lot of issues, with body image and stuff. Yeah. But I always try to have people come from it from this perspective of, if you don't have enough protein, or if you don't have enough fat, or you don't have enough carbs, or if you have too much of any of those, your hormones are going to be off. So what a lot of people don't understand is that if you have too much fat and it's the wrong type of fat, it's actually going to inflame your gut. It's going to inflame your hormones. If you don't have enough carbohydrates, it's going to cause hormone problems because it can elevate your cortisol, and people start to have more insomnia. If you don't have enough protein, you don't have those amino acids to help deliver with detoxification. So that dietary part is so critical. And I talk to all my patients about that. And then if people need more help with it, I always refer them to either macro coaches, nutritionists, or, somebody that can help to kind of walk them through that. But when I had people start to just track their food, I just simply have them use MyFitnessPal. I can't tell you how many people in 7 to 10 days, 50% of their symptoms would improve. Wow. And then I had to start questioning myself as a practitioner and just kind of say, like, man, if I didn't have them do that, I would have had them spend all this money on testing and supplements. And we honestly didn't need most of it because it was more of just trying to get their diet dialed in. So that's always the foundation of what I do, because that kind of helps to clear up the picture. And then you start building from there. And so then you look at, hormone testing, or you look at micronutrient testing, or checking like vitamin and minerals. So there's so many different aspects of that you can build on with it. But even just in Chinese medicine, you can just get a lot of information when you're starting to deal with fertility by just the person's menstrual cycle. Like, do they have a period every month? Do they have a period for 5 to 7 days? Is it bright red blood? Is there a lot of blood clots? Do they get spotting? And if they are checking their basal body temperature and they're doing the fertility charting, for a Chinese medicine practitioner, and I've done a fellowship in Oriental reproductive medicine. And so anyone that has done like a fellowship in that, you can use that basal body temperature chart to figure out their Chinese diagnosis. And that is like the best way that you can even see if your treatment is working. So you can see, like, okay, in this month, the first half of my cycle was maybe, my temperature was up and down and all over the place. And then the second half of the cycle, it was maybe a little bit low. And then maybe you put in some herbs or your treatment, and then you start to see it even out a little bit. Because if you don't have, like, for example, if you ovulate too soon, you'll have an egg that's not ripe enough. And then if the person is ovulating too late, they'll get an egg that's actually overripe. And so doing the basal body temperature tracking is a great way to see exactly where the person is ovulating and get familiar with their cycle.
And how does one go about doing the basal body temperature?
There's a bazillion apps out there. So all you need is just a basal body temperature thermometer, which if you go on Amazon, they have them on there. So you can use something like that. I've had people look at I think the website's called Fertility Friend. If you go on there, you can download their app, and you can all you do is enter your information on your temperature each day. And then it keeps track of all that, and then just shows you that rhythm of where you are.
I love this because it's so empowering. I mean, I just remember when I first went to a Western doctor, specifically when I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to get off birth control and let's make this happen. And it wasn't. And he was like, don't worry about it. When you decide it's time, we'll give you a pill and it'll force your body into doing what you want it to do. And I was like, what? No, I don't think so. Like, and it's not just even about getting pregnant, right? Like, I've got female hormones going through my body. And when I go into menopause, and my ultimate health is based on my hormone health as well, right? And my gut health. So checking that in and figuring out what your body wants, food-wise, sleep-wise, whatever, to be able to find that balance for you as you go through life is so essential for your own empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to your point, when they talk about just giving you a pill to try to make it work, like, you're not treating the root cause. And one thing too that's really important that I don't think a lot of people really understand is that the baby gets all of the mitochondria from the mother. So what does that mean? It means the mom's health is so important before she even gets pregnant, and also the dad's health. I was on a seminar last year, and it was a fertility seminar, and they were talking how you can change sperm in 72 days with probiotics.
Wow.
You can change egg quality in 90 days with probiotics. Like,
Wow.
so much is connected to our gut, and your gut bacteria really impacts the ovarian microbiome, the microbiome of your uterus. And then you also have something called an estrobolome, which is like your estrogen microbiome in your body. So the gut is really important, and then also addressing any type of nutrient deficiencies, because by simply doing that, you can improve egg quality. And we are so bombarded in our world with so many chemicals. I've done a certification in epigenetics in the past year and a half, and had introduced genetics into the practice.
Right.
And that was like, oh my gosh, like, now that I understand people's genetics better, if you understand your genetics and you see where your potential weaknesses are, your genetics is a map for you to figure out where to go and how to fix that. And really the biggest part I saw with that, and I might have shared this with you before, was in the genetic reports. The company that I use, there's a section that shows saturated fat. And I could not believe over half the people I've tested have issues with high saturated fat. That means coconut oil. I've had to take so many patients off of coconut oil. And I thought, oh, because I didn't realize coconut oil was 92% saturated fat, and lard's only like 41%.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think butter is maybe 68%, something like that. But it was the highest. And I thought, oh my gosh, well, you have all these people trying to be healthy and they're eating keto and they're doing this. And I was just as guilty telling people, yeah, have your bulletproof coffee and do this, do that. And for some people, it is truly the worst thing that they can do. And if they have certain gene variants, that high saturated fat diet increases their risk of Alzheimer's by 30 times.
Wow.
So
I think you did tell me that, because you said that you had one, like a very athletic petite woman that wasn't actually me, but she had really high saturated fat, and it was like that could knock her off completely.
Her cholesterol was really high, and she dropped it 130 points.
Dang.
Yeah, within like 6-7 months. We didn't do one single supplement. It was all food tracking. And it was simply changing the fat source just by doing more olive oil. Wow. So when you think about that, if you're doing something that's wrong for you, that's inflammatory to your body. That's actually inflammatory to your hormones.
Yeah.
And it starts a whole cascade of issues.
Well, and I think that's so key, is that each body is different. Like, that's what the genetic testing is amazing for, because it's looking at your specific body with your genes, with your two parents, and it's not looking at the trends of, oh, coconut oil is the trendy thing, or that doesn't work for everyone, right? Everyone wants to know what the diet is that they should be on. I'm like, we're all entirely different beings. There isn't one solution. You actually have to listen to yourself, feed yourself right. And even with the gut health, I mean, it really is about food too, not just popping a probiotic to try and like get it aligned, right? You still have to focus on what you're feeding your body. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, the hardest thing for so many people, because we get so tempted by all the naughty things out there, and everybody's busy, and then you just go, gosh, it's just easier to, have something quick. But then at the same time, it is true. It's harder now than ever, I feel like, to do it with food, only because we've totally messed up our food. Our soil is messed up. Like, we don't even have the raw materials there anymore because we've killed them all off. And so it's so much more challenging compared to 20 years ago when I started to treat people. And I feel like back then, we didn't do as much testing. We didn't really have it available. No one wanted to spend the money on it. So it was kind of like, oh, we do a few little changes, a few supplements, you're good to go. And we'd see these big results. And now when you approach someone, you got to do the whole thing. You have to do the mind, you have to do the body, you have to do the diet. Like, you can't just do one. It's the whole picture together.
No, for sure. Right. It really is. You've touched on coconut oil, but are there any other just food myths, just really quick? I know you said you used to love tofu, and now you're like, heck no. Is there any just other like food myths that you're like passionate about as you've been treating people over the years?
I feel like, it really, and I have to keep learning this lesson over and over for myself. It all comes down to balance, because I can tell you why anything is bad. I've seen kale be bad. I've seen spinach be bad. Yeah, because of either heavy metal toxicity in the kale, and that was where the source was coming from, or high oxalate content, which can be in the spinach. So I just really encourage people is that not to think about as food as bad, to think about food as balance. And if you do little bits of everything, that's how you're trying to maintain this balance. You know, I always tell people, I would never tell someone I'm perfect. Believe me, I like my stuff too. I mean, geez, I grew up in the Midwest. Everyone drinks beer back there. I mean,
yeah,
it's, you know, so it's not like saying never ever, but it's understanding that, okay, if I'm going to have this, okay, this is what it's going to do to me. So now I know how I can control it. Or, okay, I can have a bite and be okay. But, you know, for me, I have bad eczema. And so that's what I'm always trying to keep in remission. And so I have been avoiding wheat since 1996 because that is, my face splits open all across my mouth, everything. And I know that that's what's going to happen. I get a little cross contamination now and I can be okay, but I'm not going to sit down and have like a big wheat pizza because it's just not worth it, because it's so painful, you know, when I have that.
Right, right. And I love that because I don't think mentally that all or nothing is healthy either. It's like, okay, have a little bit of this. You're going to go to a birthday party and there'll be something there that you might want to eat. However, I always say for myself, once I kind of cleaned up the way that I eat, and I still have plenty I could do, but it's not as appealing because you can see the pain of your face breaking out in eczema or in zits or whatever your deal is. And that the pain of dealing with that, you're suddenly like, that birthday cake from a box actually doesn't even sound good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, if you have a better quality birthday cake, that you can probably have some and be okay. But if you eat the other stuff, that you're going to have issues from it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't not mention that we've been in a COVID year and you've got 2 kids. How old are they now?
14 and 11.
Okay. And obviously your husband. So there's the 4 of you. Are there tips or things for balance or sources where you get your food from that you would want to share with other people of how you've just kind of kept it all together, or just on a daily basis anyway, and keeping a family healthy?
Like trying to just do preventative stuff, you mean?
Yeah.
And we can, I mean, so in terms of our food, you know, believe me, we're not perfect. We'll go out to eat. So I know we're not getting organic food necessarily when we go out to eat. But pretty much everything I buy, I mean, all of our meat either comes from a local farmer or I get something that doesn't have hormones put in it. So we really try to, anything we buy doesn't have chemicals in it, doesn't have hormones in it. We really try to manage the food part of it. And then I give my kids treats because, you know, when I was super strict when they were little, when my oldest went to kindergarten, he was the crazy kid in the corner inhaling 4 pieces of birthday cake because he had never had it. So we'll, you know, make cookies and cake, but I make cookies with like honey and gluten-free flour and real butter. And we're not using we never use white sugar. I shouldn't say that. I mean, if I'm making a cake and I'm making buttercream frosting, I have to use powdered sugar for it. I don't know how else to do that. But for the most part, I mean, we're trying to do stuff better quality, or I give them like good quality chocolate so they feel like they're having something. And then, you know, I do force them, like I blended up this drink yesterday where it had, you know, carrots and celery and ginger and like an orange in it and cilantro, and made them chug it down because it's COVID and they need to do that. So we try to practice, you know, preach that to the kids. And I guess with any kid, they get tired of their parents and, you know, did they always do what we say? No, but I will say they have recognized what happens. And unfortunately, my youngest takes after me and he tends to get more eczema. And so over Christmas, that kid had so much gluten cookies that people had given him, and he ate them all and he didn't care. And after 2 weeks, he was broke out all over his trunk and his legs, and he was getting it all down his neck. And I was like, okay, well,
You're your mother's kid.
Yeah. And if you get COVID, I'm not helping you now.
Oh
So,
goodness.
yeah.
Well, I mean, some of it, it's gonna be, they're gonna learn it themselves, right? Like I had to. I know I'm stubborn as hell. Like
yeah. Exactly. You kind of have to go through it and experience it, because honestly, why else would you be motivated? I mean, really, that's really where the motivation comes from.
Right, right. So I know you and Dr. Bailey, your husband, have, I mean, you're always coming up with new things, whether it's classes online and I'm bad at following gig because there's, in the COVID year. But anyway, will you share with us all the offerings that the practice has and things that you're excited about coming up or have just recently come out?
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like COVID on one hand for us, it was kind of like this, oh my gosh, pivot, shift, and then do all the things we've been wanting to do for a couple of years. So we remodeled our Idaho clinic, and when we did that remodel, we have a IV area now. So the biggest offering we added is we have IV therapy. So we just hired a second RN. So we have 2 nurses now that are doing IVs, and we do IV like high dose vitamin C, vitamins and minerals, so a lot of immune support.
Okay.
I did a training in acupuncture point injection therapy, so you can inject acupuncture points with like astragalus or other vitamins and minerals and homeopathics. And so we've been doing a lot of injectables for immune support, just trying to do as much as we can just to keep up the immune resilience. Right. We put an infrared sauna in our Coeur d'Alene office, and so people can, buy a membership for our infrared sauna. We created online courses, and our goal is to continue to expand those. And then we just revamped our whole entire website. So I think there's still some tweaks there.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you, that we still have to do. So we've had a lot happen this year. I always continue to do more hormone training because I'm actually on our endocrinology board for the naturopath profession, and so we're trying to establish guidelines for people over the next few years. So I do a lot of work actually with bioidentical hormones as well, and I feel like my goal this next year is, like, there's so much, as everybody knows, and I'm trying to like funnel it all in to give people these little action steps. But I feel like the biggest thing I'm excited about really is the injectables, because that really has opened up a different world. Because I tell you, especially in the past 10 years, supplements do not work the same. I don't know if it's because we're so much more toxic, our guts are just a wreck. But it's really difficult sometimes to move the needle for some people just with some of the supplements.
And so, I mean, you're good about also finding high quality supplements. I know you, when I talked to you at one point, you were struggling to, because like big companies were taking over the companies that you trusted, and you're like, dude, that's all fillers now. I can't use that anymore. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Trying to find the quality. I mean, you have to always watch it, because yes, that's the big change. But some of the injectable things that we're doing, especially when you can inject some of the acupuncture points, those are some actually really interesting results we're seeing, where actually I've had somebody get their period back after a few years. And it's that concept of Chinese medicine. It's because the herb I used was because the person was so deficient, and I built them back up. And I've seen hot flashes improve from it, again, because they were deficient. So we always are, trying to do as much as we can to stay on the cutting edge of stuff, because unfortunately people don't stay in one place. Right. and then it gets, the stuff you used to do just doesn't work anymore, and you have to find new ways to do it.
Right. Well, and I think I'm finding that even, I mean, it went from me trying to get my period back to then breastfeeding, to then the other side of having a child, and it's constantly changing. So I think, I mean, that piece of advocating for themselves, right? Your patients are coming to you, and you are trying to stay at the cutting edge, and you can offer all of this. But on the backside, I mean, if your patient is then going home and not eating right, or not, I mean, what would you say to that? Like, is it a mindset issue that you see quite often, or?
If they're not eating right, you mean?
or just in people advocating for themselves. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people coming to you are probably pretty sick, so they're like, okay, game on, let's make the changes we need to. But
Yeah.
you really, what would you say to your patients, I guess, just in like, you have to really be in control here. I can do things to a certain point, but
Right.
look after yourself.
Well, I think that's exactly it, is that people do have to take the self-responsibility and understand, you know, the physician is a partnership. The physician is not God and can't do everything for you. At the same time, people are so overwhelmed. They're so stressed out. They're so overwhelmed and they can't deal with it. And that's really the biggest inhibitory thing I see, is that there's just so much. And as you know, just even trying to learn in the natural medicine stuff, you start to learn something and then you go deeper, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was so complicated.
Right.
And so, you know, always my goal is trying to ask myself is like, how can I help people to break this down? This is where I think like what you're doing just with some of the coaching, you know, you really need some type of coach or nutritionist, somebody in your corner that you can check in with and that can kind of help you. And you know, understanding that when you're, whatever you're taking on, the doctor is one part of that care team. There, you know, has to be the whole team together. And sometimes you can't deal with the whole thing. And maybe only you can do just this one thing, and that's okay.
Right.
And I see people just completely give up because, like, even the food tracking, you know, they'll think, oh, I ate this, forget it, I'm not going to try. And I keep trying to say to them, this isn't about being bad or being good. This is about saying, okay, I went over, great. Well, what happened? Did you notice you didn't sleep as well that night? Did you notice that you were really tired or you were really fatigued? Okay, that's what you noticed. Now you know what happens from it, versus feeling like you have all these symptoms and you don't know why and there's no control.
Right. Yeah. I love that piece. It is. It's like seeing it as a team. You need support when you're making any kind of change in your life. And especially when you go and you're like, oh, I have to change the way I'm eating. You get to change the way you're eating to find your health. But I know the feeling. You're like, Gemma, you need to eat meat with every meal. And I'm like, what? I haven't been eating meat for years. And it was that initial, like, I'm the type of person, I will do this, but what?
Yeah.
And breaking it down into manageable steps. But I love it. You have so many offerings, and I think if people go to your website and you have different options that can make it manageable. And are you taking clients? I know
I am. I still take new patients. Sometimes it might take a bit to get in, but I still am taking new patients at this point.
Okay, awesome. And it is nice to have both your Liberty Lake and your Coeur d'Alene office for people in different areas as well. Great. Well, I don't want to keep you much longer, but I always like to end on locally. Who are the people that live vibrantly, that are grounded, that inspire you just in our area?
Gosh, let's inspire me. That's like a good question, because I don't know if I can say that there's one person. I think what I get inspired about from our community is when I'm out there and I'll see, you know, the people training for Ironman, or they're out doing it. And then I go, man, what's wrong with me? Or I see someone that has 5 kids and they're running, you know, marathons, or they're, you know, 70 years old. And so I'm inspired when I go out in the community and I just see all these people so active all the time.
No, for sure. Oh, I think watching you though, you're like, I'm going to this conference and I'm doing this and we're starting this training and now we've got online here. You're doing great things. So it's a wealth of knowledge for our community. And I think there's always something to learn, and I would just inspire people to go and check out you and not to get overwhelmed. It can be totally overwhelming when you face a big health issue, but between the testing and all of the ancient medicine and current research, there's going to be a solution for most people, right?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, perfect. Anything else you want to finish up with? Any thoughts?
No, I think just thanks for doing this. I think that having more information out there in the world, this is how we all learn and grow, and it accelerates the growing process when people can have access to things like this. So thank you for the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Okay, I'm going to then the other side of having a child, and it's constantly changing. So I think, I mean, that piece of advocating for themselves, right? Your patients are coming to you and you are trying to stay at the cutting edge and you can offer all of this. But on the backside, I mean, if your patient is then going home and not eating right or not, I mean, what would you say to that? Like, is it a mindset issue that you see quite often, or
if they're not eating right, you mean?
Or just in people advocating for themselves? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people coming to you are probably pretty sick, so they're like, okay, game on, let's make the changes we need to. But
Yeah.
you really, what would you say to your patients, I guess, just in like, you have to really be in control here. I can do things to a certain point, but
right.
look after yourself.
Well, I think that's exactly it, is that people do have to take the self-responsibility and understand, you know, the physician is a partnership. The physician is not God and can't do everything for you. At the same time, people are so overwhelmed. They're so stressed out. They're so overwhelmed and they can't deal with it. And that's really the biggest inhibitory thing I see, is that there's just so much. And as you know, just even trying to learn in the natural medicine stuff, you start to learn something and then you go deeper, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was so complicated.
Right.
And so, you know, always my goal is trying to ask myself is like, how can I help people to break this down? This is where I think like what you're doing just with some of the coaching, you know, you really need some type of coach or nutritionist, somebody in your corner that you can check in with and that can kind of help you. And you know, understanding that when you're, whatever you're taking on, the doctor is one part of that care team. There, you know, has to be the whole team together. And sometimes you can't deal with the whole thing, and maybe only you can do just this one thing, and that's okay.
Right.
And I see people just completely give up because, like, even the food tracking, you know, they'll think, oh, I ate this, forget it, I'm not going to try. And I keep trying to say to them, this isn't about being bad or being good. This is about saying, okay, I went over, great. Well, what happened? Did you notice you didn't sleep as well that night? Did you notice that you were really tired or you were really fatigued? Okay, that's what you noticed. Now you know what happens from it, versus feeling like you have all these symptoms and you don't know why and there's no control.
Right. Yeah. I love that piece. It is. It's like seeing it as a team. You need support when you're making any kind of change in your life. And especially when you go and you're like, oh, I have to change the way I'm eating. You get to change the way you're eating to find your health. But I know the feeling. You're like, Gemma, you need to eat meat with every meal. And I'm like, what? I haven't been eating meat for years. And it was that initial, like, I'm the type of person, I will do this, but what?
Yeah.
And breaking it down into manageable steps. But I love it. You have so many offerings, and I think if people go to your website and you have different options that can make it manageable. And are you taking clients? I know
I am. I still take new patients. Sometimes it might take a bit to get in, but I still am taking new patients at this point.
Okay, awesome. And it is nice to have both your Liberty Lake and your Coeur d'Alene office for people in different areas as well. Great. Well, I don't want to keep you much longer, but I always like to end on locally. Who are the people that live vibrantly, that are grounded, that inspire you just in our area?
Gosh, let's inspire me. That's like a good question, because I don't know if I can say that there's one person. I think what I get inspired about from our community is when I'm out there and I'll see, you know, the people training for Ironman, or they're out doing it, and then I go, man, what's wrong with me? Or I see someone that has 5 kids and they're running, you know, marathons, or they're, you know, 70 years old. And so I'm inspired when I go out in the community and I just see all these people so active all the time.
No, for sure. Oh, I think watching you though, you're like, I'm going to this conference and I'm doing this and we're starting this training and now we've got online here. You're doing great things. So it's a wealth of knowledge for our community. And I think there's always something to learn, and I would just inspire people to go and check out you and not to get overwhelmed. It can be totally overwhelming when you face a big health issue, but between the testing and all of the ancient medicine and current research, there's going to be a solution for most people, right?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, perfect. Anything else you want to finish up with? Any thoughts?
No, I think just thanks for doing this. I think that having more information out there in the world, this is how we all learn and grow, and it accelerates the growing process when people can have access to things like this. So thank you for the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me.